All right, it's time for Yogi and the Beachman. Hi, I'm Jim the Yogi.
And I'm Rick Beach the Beachman.
We're two Michigan transplants now living in Southwest Florida.
In fact, we're cousins born in 1964, just a month apart.
I like to meditate.
And I like to play bass in a band.
I'm into chanting Om.
And I'm into throwing down some classic rock.
But together, we're on a mission
to promote people that are helping other people.
We want to make the world a better place.
One conversation at a time.
So sit back,
turn up the volume,
and get ready to laugh.
Because we like to have fun
while we spread the love.
Interviewing lovely people. Yes, we have fun.
Welcome to Yogi and the Beachman. Today we're with keeper Catran-Whitney. He's the speaker and author of the book Helplessness. Keeper, oh my gosh, you know what? I just realized this is the third time we tried to have you on our podcast. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate you being with us. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick Beach the Beachman.
Absolutely. Yes. You know what? It's all good. We are here, and that's what matters. Everything in its proper space and time. So
Yeah,
really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me to be on your show.
happy
I
to
really
have you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Two hurricanes.
Yes, we got
literally, both times you were scheduled, we had hurricanes.
Oh, yeah, I remember the first one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the
I
second
remember
one,
you. Yeah,
go ahead.
you gave me the first earthquake excuse, rather
Hurricane.
hurricane excuse. I'm thinking, well, that's original. And then he came back with the second one. Okay, there must be something to it. Okay, they're in Florida. All right. Okay, South Florida. Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, we had hurricanes back to back, 2 weeks apart. And the second one we were
Mhm.
fine, but we didn't have any internet. And so we were going to do it over my hotspot through Verizon, and that same day there was a national outage, and we couldn't even do it over the hotspot.
Yeah,
so.
it was.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
the
that
stars have aligned to
took the
have you,
whole,
Keeper.
yeah, that took the whole original. Okay, he's on to something there. Let me just let him have his space.
Well, I'm glad you're here. So, well, let's get into your story. Tell us about yourself and your book, and start at the beginning, the whole 9 yards.
Well, once again, thanks, gentlemen, for having me. My name is Keeper Catran-Whitney. I am the author of the book Helplessness, the emotional health challenges brothers experience once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. Now, before we go any further, for all of you listening, for all of you watching, this is going to be a very sensitive and for some of you, it'll be a very challenging and maybe even triggering topic, subject matter. By all means, protect yourself emotionally, spiritually, mentally, whatever you need. This will be here. Yogi and the Beach Man, their podcast will be here. You can come back, take it in chunks, or whatever you need to do. But by all means, protect yourself because we're going to get into some pretty challenging things. And as I said, I am the author of the book Helplessness. It's book one of a 3-book series from helplessness to hopefulness to happiness. And it centers around my family story when me and my brothers had no idea what was going on in our family. And so this is what will be the basis, the foundation for our conversation. So, Jim, Rick, I can tell the story and you can then pick up from there or whatever direction you would like me to go.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have questions along the way, and I also can relate to this a little bit. I'll get into that in a little bit too, but I have some stuff that I want to share about this as well.
So
Okay.
where are you located at right now?
I'm in Southern California, Rick. I'm in Woodland Hills, just about 20 minutes north of LA.
Yeah, I've been to
Okay.
Woodland Hills. I know exactly
Yeah.
where that is. That's a nice area. Really nice.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah, it is growing. One of the things that is causing my area to grow even more over the past year is the Los Angeles Rams opened up their training camp about a mile and a half from us.
Ah.
They had been in Thousand Oaks, but now you're a mile and a half from me. It's just really weird. You know, you drive by, you see the goalpost, you see the field, and it really kind of takes a lot of the mystery out of the superstarness of all of it. It's like I
Yeah.
could do. So it is
I
a
had the
growing
exact same
area.
experience in my hometown in Allen Park, Michigan. The Detroit Lions built their
Their
practice
training
field right in
facility
Allen Park.
about
5 minutes from where Jim used to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, so both of you are from Michigan and
Yes.
you're cousins and
Yeah.
you
Yep.
were born a month apart.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, Rick, were you also there in the Detroit area? I don't know if it's really Detroit or where the practice
Yeah,
facility
just
is,
out
but were you there?
in Allen Park is just a suburb of Detroit. You know, in the 50s and 60s, it was one of the part of the white flight out of Detroit and one of those suburbs of Detroit that, you know, just white middle class
Auto
American
Yeah,
workers
auto
mainly.
workers. My grandfather
sure,
worked at Ford and that kind of thing. And then
sure.
somehow my mom ended up a little further south. So I grew only like 20 miles though, but it was cornfields and golf. I worked at the golf
Yeah.
course and drove my
So
motorcycle through the bean fields.
I've never had a chance to ask anyone this, and it really kind of plays into the story a bit because my stepfather is from this part of Detroit or Michigan. Does the town Hamtramck, Michigan sound familiar to you?
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
just on our last podcast, I was telling the story of how I was incarcerated in Hamtramck.
That's right. I forgot.
Right?
You did.
I spent 10
Hey,
10 days in the Hamtramck jail,
Jail.
and it's not a pleasant place.
okay, I don't know why it just popped into my mind. I have been doing hundreds of podcast interviews, and this is the first time, probably because the two of you are here, have this conversation with me, that his hometown just popped in my mind. I'm like, so do you know of Hamtramck? And sure
I
enough,
do.
It was
wow.
a really
Yeah.
big Polish community,
Yeah.
big Polish and Hungarian immigrants, and food was great. No,
Yeah.
but also, you know, Cadillac plants and tires and smog
Yeah,
and dirt and dump
yeah,
trucks
yeah.
and
Low
His father
income
worked
and
at the Cadillac plant. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, our whole family pretty much was auto industry.
Hmm.
Really,
sure,
everybody
Yep.
except
sure.
us.
Yeah.
So when we
Yeah,
got out
one
of
of
high school,
you.
we
Yeah. Even your brother for a little bit. Yeah.
oh yeah, my brother
Work
was
at
worked for
Chrysler.
Chrysler,
Yeah.
Okay,
but
well,
we
it's a
did,
real place.
but we jumped into the Navy instead and did 6 years
Mm.
And out we went.
and out we went. That's right.
Yeah.
So you
So,
grew up in Southern California then?
well, part of my story is, well, let's just jump into it, okay?
Sure.
And you'll get some of your questions answered. As I said, my name is Keeper, and I grew up in, for the most part, in South Central LA. I went to 11th grade school before I graduated high school. My family was homeless. Well, I lived in 21 different places, homeless three times.
Wow.
We lived in Portland, Oregon, Longview, Washington, and then we escaped from my biological father and came down to LA.
Now you're saying how many siblings, Keeper?
I have seven full-blooded siblings. So I'm talking about
Okay.
four sisters and three brothers. Those are the seven siblings who came down with my mother running from my father to LA.
Wow.
But all of the siblings that I have, for what we've been able to gather, is around 24, 26. Same father, different mother. The Temptations, Papa was a Rolling Stone. You know, Rick, this is right up your alley, dude. That's right up your alley. That was my dad. I like to say wherever he unzipped his pants, that's where his home was. And so he ended up with 24, 26 kids. And
Jesus.
so life for us was extremely challenging. In 1971, where all of this really begins, we were having a hard time making a $90 to $80 a month rent. I mean, my mother and my stepfather at the time, he's now my stepfather, just could not pull it off. And living in South Central LA, you know, I know what the life is like going out to the streets looking for bottles to get a bag of rice, you know, a pound of ground beef. I know that life. I know what the scrounging is all about, going to a park and getting government cheese, all that sort of stuff. And, you know, all of the trappings that come along with it. Well, in 71, my mother, who was an amazing singer and just absolutely fantastic, she comes from a family of singers. She and my uncle and my aunt decided to get together and figure, you know what, we need to make some more money. So why don't we form a group? As good as they were, they could not make enough to make a difference. '71 is also the year Michael Jackson and Jackson 5, they're blowing up. They're everywhere. It's ABC, Who's Loving You? I Want You Back. I mean, it is everywhere, right? Every
Yeah.
little kid on the planet, not just in the US, but on the planet, wanted to be them. And we were no different. My 7 brothers and sisters, I'm number 2. I have an older brother, and then my oldest sister is directly under me. And then I have 2 other brothers, and then the 3 baby girls is what we call them. They brought up the rear. So my brothers and I, and my sisters and I, we were singing around the house. My mother eventually said, "Okay, look, if you guys want to sing, we can make more money as a singing family. Do you want to do that? Because we need this." And of course, we said, "Yeah." You know, I'm playing drums. I'm flipping over some oatmeal boxes and just grabbing some sticks and some branches from outside. And my brother, you know, we're all pretending we're all living the life, or so we thought. And so when we said yes, within 3 weeks, we are all singing in after-hour nightclubs all over Los Angeles. It
Wow. That's
happened
pretty amazing.
in weeks. When we first opened, the very first club, no one knew us that weekend. So, you know, we had just a smattering of regular people who would come in. But the following weekend, it was packed. This is
Wow. How old
after
were you?
hours. About 11, 12.
Dang,
You
that's
know. And
young.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, my 3 youngest sisters, they're like 5, 6 years old. You know, so we're all over the place. So one Saturday, gentlemen, we're rehearsing, getting ready for that tonight, for that night's performance, and the phone rings. And my mother walks over to the phone, picks it up, and says, "Shh, but keep singing." Okay, fine. She says, "Hello? Who?" And then she looks at us and says, "Jackson's on the phone."
What?
Yeah, Michael Jackson is on the phone calling our house, soon to be king of pop. She looks at the brother under me, child number 4, and says, "He wants to talk to you."
Wow.
I have no idea to this day, none of us do, how he got our phone number. But that quickly, we started to be known in LA. So my brother gets on the phone. He's like, "Hello? Uh huh." Eventually hangs up and screams, "Michael Jackson said he's heard of us. Says for us to keep singing. We'll get there someday."
Wow. That's
What
amazing.
kid could not build dreams off of that? What little poor, Black, impoverished child could not build dreams off of that?
For sure. What were you guys called back then?
We were the Whitney family.
Okay.
And so we are singing, we're doing our thing, and yeah, we're becoming pretty well known in LA. It was hard not to know who we were. Jump cut 6 years later, 1977. We are everywhere. We're doing concerts, we're doing TV shows, we're in magazines. We are everywhere. In '77, we made Billboard's Top 100 not once, not twice, but 3 times that year.
That's
We
fabulous.
could not miss. 1977 is also the year Motown had just completed their exhaustive 3-year search to replace Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, who they had lost 3 years earlier to Epic Records. And guess who they chose?
The Whitney family.
You got it.
Oh, good guesser.
In fact, Suzanne DePaz, who had discovered the Jackson 5 in Gary, Indiana, was walking us through the door. Had secured the largest new artist contract Motown offered any new group ever, larger than the Supremes, Four Tops, Temptations, the Jackson Five themselves, because where the Jackson Five had one lead singer, we had 9, including my mother, all 8 of us kids. We could do everything they did, but 9 times more. And my brothers and I played drums. 2 brothers played guitar. My younger brother played bass. So here we are, a week away from signing this contract. And I like to say the bus was outside, the door is open, the engine's running. All we had to do was step onto the bus and we were gone. A life of abject poverty was about to end like that. It was done. Fame, fortune, Motown had even created the TV show for us. I have the pilot episode in my office.
Wow.
That's how far they were ready to go. Because they said, you guys, you got a boys group, you got a girls group, you got duos, you got trios, you got so much. We can, oh my goodness, this is crazy what you guys can do. So we're going to sign the largest new artist contract either on an upcoming Thursday or Friday. The Saturday prior, my oldest sister screams upstairs, boys, come downstairs, family meeting. I come running downstairs. This is it. We are living off the money because we're still with United Artists. We're living off the money from the album that they gave us. So we have to keep singing. Okay. It's $250,000 to do this album. So I come running downstairs. Now, earlier that day, my sisters were arguing with each other about something. I have no idea. They were going in and out of bedrooms, slamming doors. You could just hear the voices were raised. They were like agitated bees, just, but it's the girls. They do this all the time. You
Yeah.
know, they always they're always into something, arguing with each other. So I'm just figuring that's it. But every now and then I would hear my mother's voice. So I'm thinking my mom is trying to, referee the situation. Okay, it's the girls. So as I said, I walked into the living room for this meeting, this hastily called meeting, but sure to be a spectacular meeting because we're about to become wealthy and rich in 7 days or less. I walk into the living room, but as I walk into the living room, my oldest sister is pacing back and forth across the entryway, and she's pissed. Okay. She and my mom got into it again
Hmm.
because they got into it a lot. Not a big deal. When I enter, off to my right is the couch. At the far end of the couch are my three youngest sisters, and they're not saying a word, which is really odd because all they ever did was chatter, chatter, chatter. They laughed, they joked, they teased everyone. In fact, that's what we all did. I mean, we were the siblings of sibling families. That's what we all did, besides singing and working together and going to school, which is all we ever did. None of us ever gang banged. None of us ever got into any trouble because singing kept us off the street, which I'm sure was part of my mom's plan with such a large family, because she could barely afford to keep food on the table.
Yeah, smart woman to keep you guys going like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was spectacular. But there are my three youngest sisters, 6 and 5 years old, huddled at the far end of the couch. Okay. So whatever happened that morning, they're still dealing with it. At the opposite end of the couch, however, are my two youngest brothers. They're like me. They notice our sisters are not saying a word, but our oldest sister is mad. And I'm thinking, okay, they're like me, they're in the dark. My oldest brother is standing at the far end of the couch behind my three youngest sisters. And he is like me, and we just kind of go, I don't know.
Hmm.
But I go and I sit down between my three sisters and my two youngest brothers. Within seconds, my mother and stepfather enter the living room. Now, my stepfather is 6'6", 250 pounds, and he wore a huge afro wig that put his height at about 7 feet tall. He's a mountain of a man. He's huge. Whenever we shake hands, his hands could swallow my hands. No problem. I barely came to his shoulder. I could look over his shoulder. That's how much larger than me he was. So my mother and stepfather, they enter the room, okay, guys? And we have this brown recliner that's in the middle of the living room, and it clashes violently with the green carpet. My stepfather walks and sits down in the recliner and immediately does this. What the hell?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Imagine, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the baby girls are silent. My oldest sister is mad, and my father-in-law, not my father-in-law, my stepfather, hides his face. Okay. My mother, who's usually very bubbly like her kids, very effervescent, very upbeat, walks and stands in front of the large window and turns around and faces her 8 children. And she's seething. She's mad. Uh, this is not shaping up to be the median I thought it was going
Yeah, you gotta be wondering what the heck's going on here.
to. Dude, whatever it is can't be that bad, right? There's just no way. Just no way. Now, we were just talking about hurricanes, right? Natural disasters. Those things happen. And those are what I call earthquakes that are material in nature. Here in Southern California, we have earthquakes all the time. In fact, the past couple of months, we've had 4 or 5 of them. They crack freeways, they uproot trees, homes rack back and forth, they crack drywall. It does its thing. You just put some plaster, slap it on, done. Replant the trees, mow the lawn, done. Rebar, concrete, little spit and gun, put the freeway back together, and you're on your way down the road. Those are material in nature.
Mm-hmm.
You can come back from those unless something has drastically happened. Emotional earthquakes are a different matter together because they cut at your core. They cut at your very being. And it's nearly impossible to come back. My 3 brothers and I are about to be hit with 3 emotional earthquakes in a 10-minute span. We are about to hear the words no brother could ever prepare for, the words no brother ever expects to hear. My mother, who's quiet, finally speaks up and drops earthquake number 1. She says, your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years.
Oh my God.
Wait,
That's messed up.
what did you say? Wait a minute.
And he's
Molesting
sitting right
who?
there in the room, right? Wow.
And
Oh yeah,
how old are your sisters? The girls?
5 and 6 years old. I am slow on the uptake. In 77, no, sorry, at this point, my younger sisters are, they're about 10 and 11. But it's been going on since 1971. It's been going on for 6 years, the year Michael Jackson called our house. As I said, I'm slow on the uptake and I'm dropping emotionally, and things aren't making any sense. Things are breaking in my mind. But all I hear are 3 words, and I have never forgotten them: park, liquor store, and apartment. That
Say
I'm
those again.
dropping: park,
Park.
liquor store, and apartment.
Okay.
I'm dropping. Rick, I am falling emotionally. Our family? No, we're the family everyone wants to be a part of. And if I'm dropping, I know my 3 brothers are falling as well into a dark abyss. My mother then drops earthquake number 2. She says, I have known all along.
What?
Jim, Jim, what doesn't even begin to cut it? But it's the best we could do. What did you say? Wait, you've known what all along? I don't know what to do. I'm about 16. I am paralyzed. I'm stunned. I'm emotionally shocked. I am just destroyed.
Yeah.
When adults hear this kind of news, they don't know how to handle it. But children,
Hmm.
because people will ask all the time, they ask me all the time, well, what did you do? Well, what did I do? I froze. I am literally locked in place. I am scared. Every emotion you can imagine that has anything to do with fear and anxiety, what we call PTSD, is washing over me. As I'm sure it is my brother. Because here's the thing, everyone in the room knew what the conversation was going to be when we were called to this meeting. Everyone but me and my three brothers. And it's sad for me to say that because that means my sisters have been experiencing this already, but they have been threatened to be quiet and never tell the boy, which is what they called us, anything about it. Otherwise, my stepfather would hurt them, would possibly kill their brother, or as my mom would use the carrot, we will never get out of this situation. So you have to deal with it. Serving them up daily.
So your oldest sister, was she abused?
All four of them were.
All
I would
four?
later find out. I did not find out about the two youngest until I was in year 6 of writing Helplessness,
Mm,
because they didn't even tell each other. My youngest sister didn't even tell their two oldest sisters for decades.
wow.
So those are the two emotional earthquakes. Those are the first two. As bad as those two were, it was earthquake number 3 that locked down me and my brothers. And this is what happens for brothers, because when stuff like this comes out, there is the natural inclination to react, to do something, if you can kind of wrap your mind about what's happening. You have this protective instinct once you start to figure things out, which it doesn't happen quickly, gentlemen. You don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's when my oldest sister, who's pacing back and forth in front of the archway leading into the living room, spins around and points a bony finger at her 4 brothers and says, "You can't talk about it. It didn't happen to you. It only happened to us girls. You can't talk about it ever." And like that, relationships between brothers and sisters that were so tight, the earthquakes destroyed everything. Everything I knew about my family, everything I knew about my parents, my sisters, was wiped away. And so the question becomes, which is why I wrote the book Helplessness, the 45-year story of how we went from helplessness to hopefulness to happiness. It is a brother story. It's the first story of its kind to ever be written from my brother's perspective. What we go through. The question that I quickly learned was, I need to talk to my sisters about this, but how do I do it when they just told me they wanted absolutely nothing to do with me?
Yeah, that's
See,
tough.
yeah, you see, for brothers, no one ever asks, "Are you okay? Do you need
Well,
to talk? Is there anything you need?"
well, after this meeting goes down and you guys find out about all this, I mean, you're almost an adult at this point, and your older sister the same, I'm guessing. So you guys are looking at this from a adult perspective. So,
No, we are not looking at it from an adult
well,
perspective.
I mean, from a teenager, but you're not
Yeah.
10 is my point. I mean, you're
A little more
an
mature.
adolescent. Uh,
Mhm.
so what goes down right after this with your mom and your stepdad? I mean, is everything just supposed to wave a magic wand and go back to hunky dory in your house and pretend you're back on Leave It to Beaver show?
In a way, yes, because what ends up happening is the realization that our livelihood is directly tied to us performing. And so for my mother, that ultimately was what she was constantly thinking. But in the immediate aftermath, what I'm thinking is probably more to your question. Once we realized what was happening, my mother and my stepfather, being the last ones to come into the room, had concocted this way to get out of the living room and get him out of the house before we could ask a question. My stepfather immediately faked a heart attack,
Mm.
grabbed his chest. Oh, oh, my heart, my heart. And my mom immediately picking up on the cue. Oh, I've got to get him out of here. I've got to get him to a hospital. And they quickly stood up and left the room. And within 5 minutes, he was out of the house. But the story is about what happens to brothers in this instant. Because when we're talking about child molestation and just molestation or sexual abuse in general, what usually happens, gentlemen, is this. There are four groups involved when it involves a family. There are the sisters, there's the predator, which happens to be my stepdad. There's the person who empowered him, who is my mother. And then there are the brothers. Everyone has an opportunity to talk to my sister and find out what's going on with them and what their needs are and try to help them in some way. And at some point, the predator, once the exposure takes place, starts to be dealt with properly. Usually, no, in any of these situations. It doesn't have to be family, it could just be any time that a woman has been sexually abused. So that exposure comes out, and then who helped? Who was the protective detail? Who was the person who empowered them, the person or persons that did this? How do you address that? But the group that's always left out are the brothers,
Hmm.
because it always comes off as though our feelings are taboo. They are an inconvenient truth. And if you're going to talk about healing the family, you must find a way to address the brother's need. As I said, no one ever asked, are we okay? Do we need to talk? And so as time went by, Rick, uh, my mother got him out of the house, but we all knew what we were up against
But your mom
financially.
was, if your mother was complicit in this abuse for this amount of time, there's no way she could be ever be trusted to help you or your brothers in any type of recovery or healing. She was part
Mhm.
of it.
Right.
So
You are correct from a healing standpoint, but as I was saying,
I
keep in
mean,
mind.
I get it. Everybody needs their mom, and especially at that age. And but with her being complicit in this, it brings a different dimension to the whole story.
Oh, the dimensions are vast because when you're growing up, your heroes are your parents. And
Hmm.
so, there's no one greater, there's no one who you trust whose opinion matters more than your parents. And here we are, our life was singing, our life was very insulated. As I said, we weren't in the streets. We in many ways, we were young because we weren't, even though, we had friends that we hung out with, we weren't doing all the things that a lot of our friends were doing, certainly in South Central LA. Our thing was we're going to go to school, we're going to rehearse, and we're going to sing. And that was it for years. And so what ended up happening was my mother got him out of the house. And we're all thinking, okay, she's done something right. But my mother could be a very selfish person, and she brought him back in shortly thereafter. It took us a while to get him out, to get him gone for good. But for me and my brothers, even with all of that, how do we deal with the shock and disbelief and the guilt and the shame and the anger and the betrayal, the blame, the stigma of all of that? Especially when your sisters are saying to you they want nothing to do with you. Our healing could only start with conversations with our sisters.
Just to be clear, when you said they don't want anything to do with you, do you mean they don't want to talk to you about the subject matter, or they just want
Yes.
you, or do you?
Well, yeah,
So,
they don't want to talk. And if we can't talk about the subject matter, then what are we talking about?
right, but so it's not like
Shunning
you're
you.
estranged from your
No,
sisters at this point.
no,
Okay.
no. But as I said, everything at this point is very surface. If any sort of real conversation is going to be had, this needed to be the beginning of it. And so
But
what we would hear from time to
back in the 70s, and we're pretty close to the same age. At that point, people didn't talk about that stuff.
no, they didn't.
They put it in the closet and
Hmm.
let their deal with it when you're 50. And that's what they all did, and they passed that stuff right down to, right well, that was our generation, and we
Yeah.
were taught by
Oh, it
the
is without question a generational thing, but that being a generational thing, and we all understand that, doesn't make what happened any easier.
well, no, of
Right.
Because, like
course
you're
not.
saying, in 1971, and even 1977, you could go to any bookstore and you could find all kinds of articles in books, sadly to say, from a woman's perspective. You know, it's the history of what men have done for women on this subject is vast. It's since the beginning of time. So my sisters had support that they could go to, or that they could certainly find. In 1977, there was absolutely nothing for brothers. They may have been something for men because women, you could go there every now and then. You get a documentary, you may get a movie of the week. You could go to a library. There was some counseling for women and for girls, but for boys, nothing. And the same holds true today.
Mm.
We are just finally coming into an era of men talking about their challenges when they were sexually abused, and those are usually celebrities or athletes or some sort of, or possibly even a politician. But the average person, those stories don't come out. And when men talk about it, they typically talk about it from them being the direct victim. It's the people who are the indirect victim who are always left behind. And that's brothers. And so my book looks to elevate and bring forth the voices of brothers so that people realize we have trauma around this
Sure.
subject. And we cannot be viewed as just an inconvenient truth. Because even with my sisters, Rick, we would still be together as a family, but you would hear from time to time, how come you didn't hear me weeping? How come you didn't see my tears? Well, the whole point of making sure that we don't is keeping them in place by threatening them. And so I have to carry all of this once I started to learn, because what had happened, because the confusion and the crisis from a brother's perspective is, you're exactly right. You want to do something. And usually you want to do something very, very physical. You want to just lash out, but there's a
well,
lot more to
there's no
consider.
doubt that I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know if it's similar, but well, it is similar. I had a stepfather, and he would whack my mom around all the time, and there's nothing I wanted more than to kick his ass. When my mom had a
Yeah.
black eye, wearing her 1970s big sunglasses on her eyes. So uh, but I just always wanted to be the protector in that situation, and just couldn't be.
Yeah.
But moving forward, I think I took that type of what happened, that among other things, when I was a kid. And I had three daughters total. Jim's got two. So we're the dads of five daughters. So when I hear stories about girls getting abused, it just literally makes my blood boil. I wasn't really looking forward to talking to when I read your bio, because I don't feel comfortable with the subject. I feel better now that I get to know you a little bit, but I was a little apprehensive about the subject matter.
Yeah.
And but I see where you're going with that. But I don't know, why wouldn't you just use outreach, like if you were in high school and stuff, go to your high school counselor, or if you guys were going to church, or a
Well, you asked a very good
church
question.
pastor, or was it just so taboo, and it just ingrained in your hard drive at this point that no, this is going to be kept inside the Whitney house and it's not leaving, period?
Well, Rick, you asked a very good question, and you answered it 5 minutes ago. Generation. Back when I was growing up, you kept all that stuff in home, in
Mhm.
the house. It did not leave. And in fact, if you talk to a counselor, if you talk, which we did, school counselor, or if you talk to someone at the church, their reaction was, well, you guys need to figure out a way to work that out, because that's what took place back then. In fact, we went to aunts, we went to uncles, we went to grandparents, and their reaction was, well, you guys need to figure that out. Even they would not come to our defenses. And by extension of them doing that, they put us in a very vulnerable spot.
Well, yeah,
And when they did it, what
they
they
were
eventually did
also
was they
complicit.
became part of a protective detail that protect my mother and my father. And that was more important than them protecting their nieces and nephews and grandkids.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever heard this story, Rick. So my dad, like both our stepfathers were abusive. My dad put my mom in the hospital, beat her up so bad before I was 5, and they finally divorced. But he remarried, and a woman he remarried, she always went by the name Cookie, awesome woman. At her funeral, we learned that her oldest daughter was molested, raped by my father, my original father, biological father. And I heard about it through my other sister. So there's me and my sister, were like originals, and we had 2 sisters, and then later on, another stepsister and another stepbrother, from my dad with this with Cookie. So Cookie's original daughter from another marriage, what we learned, was molested by my dad, and I learned this from my original sister Sue, and she tells me, and she says, Don says she was molested by dad. Huh? Isn't she stupid? And man, I'm like you. I froze. I didn't know what to think, you know, but it's been burning inside me for a long time. I didn't go to my dad's funeral.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, no, I don't. It took a long time for it to really sink in. Like, there's no reason for her to lie about this. Why hasn't any of us gone to her and no one said, damn, we're sorry. This is awful. Everybody just kind of just blew it off. But it burned inside me for a long time. And like I said, I couldn't go to my dad's funeral.
Well, did you ever confront your dad with that?
No, no, never did. But my mom told me some other things that happened when, back before I was 5 in the house with my sister. It's just like, yeah, it's just so messed up, you know?
Yeah,
Never talked to any of my
I
other
don't want it to
siblings
get
about it.
lost. I don't want it to get lost that what we're talking about is what you're sharing. What
Yeah,
do brothers do?
exactly. I didn't know what to do.
Because there is nothing for us. Like I said, in 1977, there was nothing, and even today, there are no one-step program, not even a one-step program or a documentary or a movie, or there are no articles about what brothers can do. Because what ends up happening is I do a lot of speaking at events, and invariably, guys, a woman's going to stand up. It happens every time. And they say to me, your sisters are right. You can't talk about it. Completely blowing off the fact that it happened in our house. Well, of course, we are impacted. We may not know about it, but if it's taking place in your house, you are impacted in a negative way. That went a long way toward explaining why some of the conversations we had with our sisters, their reactions just didn't line up. It's
Mhm.
because we didn't know what they were going through, right? Because here
Sure.
they are, girls trying to get up and go to school and maintain relationships with friends with all of this on them. And so
Mhm.
me and my brothers didn't know. So when I'm at a speaking engagement, excuse me, as I said, a woman will invariably say, Keeper, your sisters are absolutely right. It didn't happen to you. And I said, well, it did. But maybe this will help you understand that I understand what my sisters are going through. 6 years before my sisters were sexually abused, my older brother and I, we were sexually abused by our babysitter in 1965 every day for almost 6 months. So I do get it.
Mm.
I understand both sides. And if we're going to have a conversation about whose trauma is worse, my trauma versus your trauma, that doesn't help the situation.
Right.
What helps the situation is how do we come together to help figure out, first of all, how to give brothers what they need, because there is nothing for them. And then how do we bring brothers and sisters together, Jim, like you, and create a pathway of entry for a conversation? Because you are obviously a brother in pain. This has really affected you, and you have been carrying it for a long time, as did I. And to know that our family or our parent could do something like that is so devastating. But what do you do? Especially when you don't have any support systems or anyone to show you. So my book not only explores what happened, but it answers the question. Helplessness is where we go, because the psychological and emotional impact is such that uh, uh, our self-esteem is impacted. Our self-worth can also be impacted. We're trying to emotionally regulate, very similar to you, Jim. How do you emotionally regulate so you just don't blow up and go after your dad?
Mm-hmm.
How do I emotionally regulate me and my brother so we don't go after our mother? Not even talk about our stepdad, but our mother. How do you do that when there's nothing there to support you? And so I'm thinking we need to create situations or tools that help brothers, because as a young boy, you're starting to learn this stuff. The support we do or do not get will have a direct impact on the men we grow to become, because most times when boys especially are sexually abused, they tend more often than girls to repeat what happened to their sisters or to them. So there are very real world consequences to
Wait,
not
wait.
having
Uh,
support systems in place.
There's you just said evidence that if it happens, I I I would accept what you just said as far as if a boy gets sexually abused, he's more likely to be an abuser. I would think that that would be true. But you said, did you also add if his sister was abused, he would be more
Yes,
like in that category
yes,
also?
sisters repeat what happened to them.
And
Yes,
and there's
absolutely.
okay.
Wait, are you asking if the brother, like if the sister was abused, if the brother was more likely to be an abuser?
That's what I'm gathering from what he's saying.
And is that
Yeah,
what you said?
yeah.
Why would
Okay.
that?
How
Why
does
would
that,
Because
yeah,
you
what
see
makes
the
that correlate?
action,
I would
you
think it
see
would.
the action of not having any, but not having any consequences when you're dealing
Okay.
with trauma.
Well,
So assuming they know about it and they're aware of
Yeah,
everything going on. Okay.
yes,
well, it seems like, I mean, really, in any situation like this, it really just has to go back to the root cause, to coin a phrase, and as someone in that, I mean, there has to be a point where the cycle gets broken. And Jim and I, we've talked about this on other podcasts with other guests, and both of us, I mean, it's not like we had a conversation when we were teenagers and say, "Hey, we're not going to let this shit happen to our families,"
Mm-mm.
but we both, that's what happened, and none of
Mhm.
that with him or Jim's sisters, me or my brother, that cycle of abuse did stop with the generation prior. And I think all our kids are really well rounded, and hopefully none have ever been abused. But it just so that's what your family really has, sounds like it's done, or have you, has that not, is there more of that, has that trickled down
Through your siblings? Is that what you're
yeah,
asking?
through your siblings? I mean, is there your nieces and nephews and your you know your
well,
sister's children? I mean,
we
is
we
everything
have
cool in your
done
family now, or
we have done better than most. Let me put it that way. We have done better than most, but there has been some fallout. And to your family's credit, you're able to stop what is oftentimes a generational pattern.
Yeah.
Okay, it's very hard to get it to be a full stop with one generation. Very difficult. And you two seem to have done that. Unfortunately for my family, it hasn't happened completely, but we are better than most. And so,
well, do you guys said, have you guys said, I mean, I would think, and I'm far from a therapist, I'm just I'm not that, but it seems like you guys have to have said, "Hey, let's all get in a room together and just talk." I mean, has that ever happened? You get all the kids together and just have a big cry fest and talk fest and yell scream fest for half the day, you know, a few hours, and get this all out? And what's your relationship now with all your siblings? Because we're fast forward, what, 45 years now?
well, to answer the first part of your question, that is much easier said than done. Okay, everyone's individual. Everyone's carrying their own baggage, their own burden around all of this, and everyone's trying to navigate their way. And so to try And to your question, yes, we have tried to put that type of thing together, but it never has come to pass because now a lot of things there are just a lot of dynamics at play. A tremendous. Everyone has their own individual relationship with each of their individual siblings, and they
Mhm.
each come with their own, as I said, baggage or comes with their own complexities. Okay, and so oftentimes people will say, "Well, that's all you guys need to do," except that ain't that easy to do.
Right.
It's just not.
I-
You know,
Is
it's
your
near
mom?
impossible. But to answer the end of your question, where I'm at with my brothers and sisters right now, it took me 45 years to talk to my sisters about it. It wasn't until I started to write this book that it just occurred to me, brothers need to know that they are not alone. And I didn't want my family story to just end like so many other families, which to me is on a dunghill of just family sexual abuse trauma. I wanted my family story to be one that could help people. And I also wanted to take my story as a brother and say, other men and other brothers who've experienced this, this is what we're going through, and you're not alone, because oftentimes that is the case. But once I started to write the book, Rick, what I knew I could not, I wasn't going to write it. Not that I couldn't, but I wasn't going to write it without telling my sisters first, even though we hadn't talked about it. Because along the way, there were many woulda, coulda, shoulda moments on my part where for me, I was just a complete failure for them.
Were
And
they
yet
cool with
we,
Were they cool with that?
well, when I called my second sister and I told her I'm going to write this book from my brother's perspective, because I think our family, this could help people as opposed to just being something that's going to be a waste. Let's use our story to help. And when I went to her house to tell her, I was so afraid to talk to her. This is the second sister. And ultimately, what I got out of it, just to make a long story short, was she said, "Of course, you should write the story. All you boys should write a story. It's not my story, it's your story, but men need to know what's going on." And that was the last thing I was expecting to hear. Then I called one of my youngest, the twins, and told her what I wanted to do. And again, I was expecting, hell to come raining down on me, but she said no. And I think a lot of that has to do with time. You grow, you have your own children, and you start to
Yeah.
have a different perspective. But the hardest one is all was when I called my sister who said you can't talk about it.
Mm.
I'm like, no way this is going to fly, but I'm going to do this anyway because I'm doing it for the right reason. Everyone else is being supported in some way except for me and my brothers, which other brothers understand this. When I called her, it was one of the scariest things I have ever done. It was probably the second scariest thing I ever done. The first being when I eventually caught my stepfather and confronted him and gave him 24 hours before I killed him. When I called my sister, I said, "Look, I'm going to write this book from my brother's perspective. It's not your story, from my brother's perspective," and told her what it was going to be about. And she was silent for about a minute. And I'm just thinking, okay, she's winding up. But when she spoke, she said, "Okay." And I'm thinking, what do you mean, okay? I've been waiting 45 years, which is the point of the book. Ultimately, our story. It was 45 years wasted. I should have gone to them much earlier and talked much earlier, but the fear of you cannot talk about it was so, it locked me and my brothers down so much to the point that me and my brothers didn't talk about it amongst ourselves. But she said, okay. And so then I wrote Helplessness. And here's the craziest part of it. Helplessness, three of my sisters contribute to
That's
the book.
Hmm.
cool.
That's great.
I would never have thought that was possible. Two of my brothers contribute to the book. And from a healing standpoint, part of what you have to go through this acceptance, first of all, that you're in pain, that you're in trauma, because without it, no matter what it is, no matter what the situation is, you just have to deal with it and accept it. Because if you can't do the acceptance part, there's very little chance of ever recovering. And when you're dealing like with something like this, and so Jim, I'm really curious what you think about this part of it, since you have somewhat of a similar story that I think it may be a lot closer than you think to ours. Is this type of thing just settles into your marrow? It's like DNA, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And DNA replicates itself in ways we have absolutely no idea, right? We could see the surface part of it, but there are things going on in our body we have absolutely no idea what's going on. Trauma is the same way.
Sure.
We can see the surface part of it. Oftentimes, family and friends to get a sense, and some of them can even see the surface part of your trauma. But what's going on beneath is where the real problem is. And if you can't get a hold of that, then you're in trouble. You see, the original title was Helplessness, the mental health challenges brothers go through. Until I realized it was not mental at all. Mental is what comes next. See, mental is logic thinking. You're alone, you're in isolation, you're in your head. But something happens before that. And that's what I was experiencing. I didn't understand it. And I come to learn my brothers were experiencing the same thing. We didn't understand it. What we were dealing with first was the emotional challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't get our emotional challenge supported, if we can't bring systems in place to help us with that, where do we go? Especially men, where do we go? We go up here. We go to that mental place where we are alone, we're logic thinking, we're in isolation. I got to do this, got to do that. Okay. And there's nothing anyone can tell us because our emotional needs have not been met on this. And mine got to be so dark, as I just hinted. I gave my stepfather 24 hours before I was going to kill him because my mother brought him back again amongst my sisters. This is right before I was to get married. And I'm
So
like,
is your
okay,
family,
this cannot happen.
were you guys church going family, religious? I mean,
No, no, we
did
were more spiritual side of things, you know.
so did
We
anyone, did you guys ever say, hey man, maybe let's say some prayers together and get some good energy in this house? Because it seems like in a house growing up like that, it would have been it
well,
would
I
have
think
it would have
oftentimes,
been, it would be like Jim said, this your story's kind of dark, but what I kind of find dark about it is that with your mom sticking around with your sisters in the same house, being she can maybe didn't condone but was certainly complicit in this abuse, your stepfather in and out of the picture, and no one, and you guys just feeling trapped. And it seems like if they're that, maybe even now you might want to consider, going taking a step or two in that direction.
well, here's the thing that I can say or give you an answer on that. While we were going through it, once we found out, one of my sisters did go to our church, one church that she went to, and like so many churches even back then, pastors, they wanted nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing. As I said, we even
Well,
went to
then
our.
she's probably in the wrong church. I mean,
But here's the thing, Rick, trying to find the right church can be time consuming and it is draining. It is a kind of
well,
situation
certainly. I
after a
just was thinking
while.
about just how much bad energy must have been. A lot of our stuff, a lot of our gas and kind of where we geared is the health and wellness space. So we're always talking about good energy and healing and
Mhm.
nutrition and feel good and vibrations and chakras and stuff like that. So, and it's funny because 6 months ago I would have never even thought about this, but eh, Jim, you gotta, you it would have to be that way. If you're in that kind of situation, you got all these kids, you got 3 or 4 of them just getting habitually abused, and everybody knows it's all kept just dark and tucked away.
Well, okay. It's just like our lives. Okay. I mean, we weren't having sexual abuse, but there's a lot of physical abuse, a lot of
I'm
trauma.
not saying
But
there's
we weren't
difference.
running to the church.
No,
We
no,
were just trying to get the hell out of our
no,
situations.
I didn't mean run to the church back then.
Yeah.
I'm like, use it over through the years when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and say, hey, did any of your brothers or sisters, find God, become born again, and just feel like this is all released and kind of come back home?
No one
I was
became
looking to
born
see if
again.
if
No,
there was a
no,
story like that in there where someone just turned to
no,
God and said, hey, this might work
no.
for me. Because
No, they
I
continued.
do believe in the power of prayer, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was going with that.
I understand. Yeah, and it's a very valid point. And uh, as I said, we went to some places, and they weren't willing to offer any support whatsoever. In fact, even as I was writing Helplessness, at times it got to be pretty dark. And as I said very early on, it ends up in a fantastic place. My family story. I have great relationships with three of my sisters now and
Awesome.
two of my brothers. And it took a long time to get there. But on my path to writing Helplessness and dealing with, my own emotional trauma, which is an everyday thing, as trauma is for most people, I contacted a couple of pastors and said, look, I want to talk to you about what happened. And I even called family therapists. I called psychologists and told them this is what I want to talk about. And to a person, they all said, uh, I've never heard of a story like this from my brother's perspective. I can't help you.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, wait a minute, what do you mean you can't help me? The female therapist said, if you were a woman, I could help you. I know how to deal with that from a woman's perspective, but from a brother's perspective, I have no idea. I have never heard of anything like this. I said, you never thought to consider that a brother, once they learn their sisters have been sexually abused, are not traumatized, and they may need some help, at the very least, a conversation. I said, no, I don't know what to do with you. And that has been the reaction every single time, which really just told me, I really need to write this because no one
Yeah.
is talking about it. Brothers are taboo. If you're going to heal the family, you can't heal three-quarters of it. You can't deal with the sisters. You can't deal with the predator. You can't deal with the person who empowers them. You also have to address the brother's needs, and they are emotional. Because as I said early on, if we're told we can't talk to you about it, where do we go? And that's why I look to elevate the brothers to bring us into a very serious dialogue. And it could be a dialogue around religion. I have been on many religious podcasts and interviews, and every time it's like, I've never heard of this. I never even thought about it. Many ministers and pastors I've spoken to, and they said, I have never even thought about what brothers are dealing with. This is new to me. I'm not surprised that
Yeah.
oftentimes people will say, well, there are other things that the church can offer you, such as prayer.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, you still have to deal with the everyday trauma
Yeah.
that's behind all of it. The prayer is fantastic, uh, but you still have to deal with the same emotional needs going forward.
Yeah.
Well, where can people that here want to read your story and pick up your book? Where Amazon?
Oh, yeah, they can certainly get it for Amazon and Barnes and Noble online. Uh, but let me say this: ultimately, we're looking about having a conversation where brothers are heard, sisters understand what their brothers are going through, so that we can become allies in this fight against child sexual abuse. To give brothers a platform to speak up and let people know this is what they're dealing with. Because certainly here in America, on any given day, there are 40 million adults walking who have been sexually abused as children. And statistically speaking, every day in America, there are 160 unique children a day who are sexually abused. So yesterday, a bunch of kids went to school. They played tetherball. They played hopscotch. They had lunch with their friends. They went home and, had dinner with their family. And somewhere in the night, someone opened the door. It will happen 160 times tonight. And these are reported, gentlemen. These are the reported numbers. Because as I said, the stigma is so bad, people don't report because who wants people to know the shame of what's going on in your family? We keep silent on this stuff. And it doesn't help anyone except the predator and those who empower him. So it'll happen again before midnight tonight. And it will happen again tomorrow, and the morrow after that, and the morrow after that.
So
So unless, yes, sorry.
The catalyst for your book became the silver lining. Hoping to get into the silver lining here.
Yeah, it did. It did. The silver lining was me finding who I am and what I could become if I just felt the fear of needing to talk and just dealt with it. Once I started talking about it, all those shackles, all of those chains that were holding me back, this emotional prison, it just fell away.
Yeah.
Because the exposure meant that the person or persons that were keeping me in check, they no longer had power over me. And I think oftentimes we give them more power than they deserve simply because we're afraid of what the reaction is going to be. Not so from them, but from other people. Because oftentimes people will tell you, as they have told me, dude, if that was me, I would have done this. They've told my sisters, I would have done this. Girl, I would have done this. That's all noise. Because you don't know what you're going to do in a situation like this. It's very hard. And so, because people are going to come at you with their advice that holds no real, there's no validity to it other than just, you just keep it. But at the end of the day, we were able to find our way through because we were able to talk. And as I said earlier, I never would have thought that would have happened. Never in my life, but it becomes a story of hope and triumph and resilience and surviving and thriving. And it can happen.
Yeah. And you're working on a second book or third book?
Yeah, I am working on hopefulness now, which is how do you go from helplessness to hopefulness?
Okay.
How do you find hope, after all this has happened to you?
You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. What makes it work is there are people, places, and events in your life that are so emotionally loving and caring. Those are the things that keep us tethered, I believe, emotionally, so that we can move forward in a good place. So you start there. You start remembering and thinking about it's more of a thing of gratitude, right? What are the things that I'm happy about? What are the things that make me happy? Who are those people that I need to connect more deeply or reconnect and bring them back in and start to share those stories because they can help pull you out. And then happiness is about where I'm at right now with my sisters, with my brothers, with my family. I didn't think I would ever be here talking about this stuff. But I'm so happy to be able to do it because over the years, I have learned there are so many brothers who are going through what I went through, but just were afraid to talk. They didn't have an opportunity, and there was nothing there from a clinical standpoint that could help them. So we are playing, my brothers and sisters and I, almost every day. At least 6 of us are.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's been a tough story. I know it, and maybe tough for some people listening. Hopefully, your message is getting out there to the right person, the right people, and giving them that hope that they need and that motivation to talk about it, to bring
No,
it into
that's
the
the
light
key.
and get through it.
That's the key. Having the conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Nice hanging out with you, Keeper.
yeah.
Nice meeting you.
Glad
Jim
this
and
finally
Rick,
happened.
I appreciate it. Happy holidays to the both of you.
You
Be
too.
safe
Merry
out there.
Christmas.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Keeper.
Have a good one, Keeper.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Take care. So if you just listen to this podcast and you appreciate the content and the work that we're doing, we would love your support. Look in the comment section of this episode. Subscribe, rate us, comment. This gets our podcast in front of other listeners. And if you noticed, we don't have advertisers. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can help keep it this way. Become a supporter right now. We'd appreciate it. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick the Beachman.
Peace.